everybody, Caleb here, and today I've got this old Martin. This is a D-28 from 1976, and the action is a little high, and there's no saddle left, so it needs a little bit of setup work. On top of that, it's got a couple of cracks in it. They seem to be kind of stabilized, but they're definitely not the cleanest. There's one more here that I'm seeing. Besides that, it just needs a little bit of cleanup. The high action kind of worries me a little bit because I think we're in the realm of neck reset, and that's never a good realm to be in. But we'll get this taken apart and then we'll know for sure. But it sounds great. It sounds just like an old Martin should. High action and playing it is still fun because of how good it sounds. But yeah, I'll go ahead and start working at taking this thing apart. We'll set it down and take a real good look at it and see where we go from there. So I got this thing sitting here, and I wanted to show this off first. I think I talked about this in the mandolin video I just did, but you can see that headstock, and something is wrong here. You've probably seen it by now. These strings are wound around the wrong side of these posts, and you can see the difference in the angle between this side of the nut and this side of the nut, because these strings are, are going around the right way, and they go a little more straight through. But on this side, they have to make drastic turns, or they run into another post, which isn't good for tuning stability. So that's not quite right. We're going to want to replace these strings eventually anyway. They are tuned to a whole step down at the moment, mostly because I didn't think this would get me up to full pitch. So I wanted to do just a little bit of measuring, and keeping in mind that it's probably going to be lower than it would be at standard pitch. Yeah, it's high. We're at 120, more than that, more than 120 thousandths, and there's no saddle left. On this side, we're over 100 thousandths. Probably closer to 110 thousandths, and no saddle left. That saddle is just, it's all gone. There's no height left to be taken from that. Any more than that, and the strings will no longer go over the saddle. They'll just go across it, and I don't want that. That's not great. Something I did notice as I look along the neck heel is I'm almost wondering if it's not a little loose. The seam is very pronounced, and usually that's a sign that that heel is a little loose or has come loose and shifted. I would suspect that's probably the issue, is that the heel has come loose and it's time to finish it off and put it back. I'm going to take the strings off of here, and then we'll actually look at the actual neck angle with a straight edge across the fingerboard, but that will be after I tune this down. I gotta remember that I'm turning these the wrong way. Okay. So I got my pin holder out, so I can start pulling these pins. I'll try to keep them in order. It sometimes is helpful. These pins don't want to come out of there. That's not good. This one left the bottom half in there. I wasn't pulling crazy hard on it. I imagine it left the bottom half in there. I don't think that was half a pin. I don't know that for sure. Yeah. Okay, well, that's kind of a bummer, but it's a good thing those are pretty standard pins. Okay. Get those out of the way. And we'll see where we are. So I've got this out here. I've got all the strings off of here. And I'm just putting this on here. And in case you can't see, it's running right into that bridge. It should be like that, give or take, and it's not. It's really bad. The bulge in the body is not terrible. It's not any worse than a lot of them. I've spent some time actually looking at this thing, and it is a little bit, it looks far worse than it actually is. So I was looking on the inside here, and there is, so there's this crack here, there's another one here, there's a small one here. I'm not sure how well you can see it. There's also one here, and there's a little one there. And all of them have been glued and cleated to some extent. There's some really nice diamond cleats on these cracks back here. There's a fairly, I say large in surface area. It's not real thick section in here because the X bracing comes through here. So in this section that cleats those. This has its own cleating. This is maybe the one that's not cleated, but it's so small and it's already been re-glued, I think. That's not really that big of a deal. So these are actually really solid. I don't really see that being a problem. And everything in there seems tight, bracing wise. The bridge plate itself, it has been reinforced in the past, but it doesn't seem to be an issue. Like, it's got an extra little pad right around where the strings are, so the strings don't pull through, I would guess. But beyond that, it looks good. It looks stuck. The braces look stuck. I spent a long time looking on the inside of this thing, making sure that it looks good. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the internals on this guitar. Something I'm going to want to do is maybe try to clean these up a little bit. You can hear them. And you can really feel them. So at some point, we'll try and clean that up. But what I think our real issue here is neck angle. The bridge doesn't seem to be lifting, so I don't think that's the issue. I'll grab a little piece of paper here. Not anywhere along the back is it lifting. Can't get anything underneath of it. I think our issue is neck angle, but my guess is still that the actual neck joint itself is to some degree loose. That's really what I'm thinking, is because this seam is so obvious to me. I mean, because usually they're kind of hard to point out where the seam is, but I can see the seam really, really well. I think that it's a little loose. So I'm really thinking it shouldn't take much to try to get this neck off of here. That will be the next thing I do, I think, because I don't really see any other solution to our neck angle problem other than adjust the neck angle, which means I gotta pull the neck on this thing, and my guess is it's just gonna be roughly put it back in, and it should be better with maybe some minor adjustments. I've done this a couple of times in the not too distant past, so this should be fairly routine. This is gonna be something I'm gonna want to get it set up for before we go spending a whole lot of time on this. So I'm gonna go get set up for the next thing, which I'm going to want access to the dovetail joint first, and then we're going to loosen the tongue, the fretboard extension, and then we'll pull the neck. So I'll go get whatever I need to do this thing first, and then we'll come back. Well, I had a little bit of an audio issue, and I didn't notice that I wasn't recording But I've gotten started on pulling this fret here. To catch you up, I'm like 85% sure that this joint is loose. And I'm more than that sure that the neck angle is the issue. It's not a bracing issue, and it's not a bridge issue. It's the neck angle at the joint that is the issue for action. So we are going to go ahead and pull this neck. So I'm just very carefully using my tools here to try to pull this fret out. I did wet the wood down just a little bit to help soften the wood fibers. And I'm just trying to work across the fret and very carefully pull that out of there. Okay. That's just about out of there. Tear out's not terrible. It's actually looking really good. I think everything that's there will be covered up by the fret going back in. What I'll do next while this is all solid, because I do need to still loosen the fretboard extension, is drill the tiny little hole I'm going to need right in the middle of that fret to get access to the dovetail joint. So I've got a bit out to be the exact same size as the steamer that I'm going to stick in there to help steam this out, but it should be small enough that the fret will cover it up. So now I have to kind of eyeball this part and hope we hit that hollow point, that hollow spot that I hit right there. So that's good. I know I hit that that dovetail joint because it got hollow. I felt it just drop. That's what we're aiming for. We're trying to hit that joint to help us get steam in there. Just like that. Alright, so that's mostly good. There's one little spot there that's coming up. I'm going to see if I can't get that glued back down, but also while I'm going to do that, I'll go ahead and do that off camera, but I'm going to need to heat up my fretboard removal tool, or my bridge removal tool, my heating iron really, to try and get this off of here. So that's going to take a little bit of time, so I'll get that starting to get warmed up, and we'll come back when I start trying to pull that off of there. I've started working on getting this thing softened up. I'm just basically setting my iron on here and working it across. It gets pretty warm pretty quick, and it comes off. It's been coming off fairly easily. You can see here I'm working this tool in here, and I just work it back and forth. Yeah, this is working really good. As long as I don't bend my tool. There we go. All right. I'm going to work on this a little bit more off camera. It's going to be a lot of working back and forth and back and forth. And we'll see where we get from there. I'm just about done working this thing in here. I'm fairly certain is loose all the way around at the top. There's obviously going to be a small section underneath this particular fret that I don't want to touch because it's hot. That's not going to come loose because it's still attached to the dovetail. So I'm not so worried about that. But I think we're just about ready to start working the steamer on. And I'm pulling crazy hard on this thing just to get it out of here. Oh, there we go. Oh, and I bent it pretty good just now as well. So I'll wait for that to cool down, but I think we're just about done with that fretboard extension. So I can turn my heater off, and time to fill up the steamer and start working on that. So while the steamer is building up, I will also get the actual jig that sits on here to help pull the neck, and we'll do that next. All right, we've got this set up here. This should be ready to go. I've been building up steam for a little while just to make sure we have enough. Keeping in mind, oh, I know the one thing I forgot. I need some kind of wrench to turn those nuts. So I'll see what I can find real quick, and then we'll pull that neck out of there. I've only got 2 wrenches I can find, so I imagine this is going to be the right one. Cool. So, this shouldn't be too difficult. I think it's loose. We should just be able to pump a little bit of steam and then see where we're at. Definitely in a pocket. We'll pull that out of there. Just a second. I'm just doing light pumps. Very steaming. Okay, once again, I don't think this was gonna be all that much of a fight because I think it's coming loose. And now that we've actually got it just a little bit warm, I really don't think this is going to put up much of a fight. Of course, now that I've said that it won't put up much of a fight, it's hard to say. Not a whole lot of tension in there. Okay, a little bit of tension. Let's see where we're at. See what that'll do. We'll stick this in the other one. Come on, come on. Yep. I didn't think it would take much. That's hot. Let's get that out of there. Let's get as much water soaked up as we can. Yeah, that came right out of there. I really think that was loose. Wasn't much at all to it. Which, you know, a neck being loose is not great, but realizing that the neck is loose and that's the problem is not a bad thing. Just a little bit of water on the bottom. Just trying to get this all cleaned up while we can. Now what's interesting is I don't know how well you can see that joint, but there's a lot of it that looks bone dry, which means if it was dry, that glue, there wasn't glue there. So it had already come loose in that spot. Only where it's wet did my water actually do anything. Weak joint, I suppose. It's good for me though. We'll set this aside to dry for a little while. while I've got it here, I can show off. Here's all the numbers. It's marked 28, 173, 553, and then 28 again, upside down. The 28 upside down is stamped on. The rest of them are handwritten. I imagine some of that is the serial number. I actually don't know what the 553 is. 173 is on the serial number. The 28's got to be the D-28. What the 553 is, I'm not sure. But they're all on there. So we'll let this dry, clean out the old glue, and then take a look at where the neck angle actually is when it's pressed all the way in. So we've had a little bit of a break. I worked on this guitar on the live stream, which was last Friday for me. We worked on getting the neck angle right and cleaning everything up. Basically, I took all the glue that I could out of it out. I put the neck back in, and I noticed the neck angle was still not great. So then we worked on getting the neck angle great. And as you can see, we're finally floating just about perfect. I am really happy with the way the guitar is looking. And I think we're ready to start putting this neck back in there. The problem is that now that I've changed the neck angle, the joint is crazy loose. So we need to snug that back up now. I've got a couple pieces of mahogany, some shims that we'll just glue into this neck joint. This is some really nice mahogany, you know, like far nicer than needs for shims, but the neck is mahogany and it's nice to keep, you know, like the same kind of wood going throughout. So I've got a real nice piece of mahogany just trimmed down real thin to be shims that we're going to glue in here. So we'll take just a little bit of glue, and I've got these wedges out so I can kind of counter the angle on the dovetail so it's easier to clamp up. I'm just using them kind of like cawls. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on here. These are just about the right size. They're probably overhanging the back a little bit, and they're probably still a little bit thick, which is okay because we'll carve these down to fit perfectly into the dovetail. Same thing with this side. So put that in there. Have a couple of clamps. And then I'm going to put these wedges in to help kind of straighten it out for the clamps. Alright, that looks good. We'll put another one up a little bit higher. Just making sure it's all pressed on there real good. It actually looks pretty good. There's one spot right here at the very end I'm not totally happy with. It's a clamp on a clamp, but it'll help pull that end in tight. So we'll let this dry for a little while. It's wood glue, so it'll take a little bit of time to set up. But this should be looking really good before too long. And then we'll start fitting that back into the neck pocket and carving away what we don't need to get a perfect tight fit. So we've got these shims glued on here now. The next step will be to start fitting that back into the joint. I've got the carbon paper out to help mark where it needs to be carved away. I just need to cut me some pieces off here. So I'll set that aside. We'll kind of wrap this around here. Turn it upside down. We'll stick it in that joint. Push the neck all the way that way and push it down as far as we can get it. So we're about a 1/4 inch off, which ain't bad. That's why I like to carve or thin those shims down pretty thin before I get started. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting like this, and that's a lot more work to get that down all the way. But you can see I've got some marks. I need to start carving away some dark spots to help get this going in there deeper. So I'll take either my chisel or a scalpel, or whatever I got, and just carve those away real careful like. Turn that over, knock this section out. Just barely carving away at that. Okay, so we carve away those sections that were dark. That should help this drop in a little bit further. We rewrap this, and we start to learn why this is a process that takes a while. Because then we fit this back in here, push it all the way up, push it down, and this might take a while, but this helps get this perfect. And that's what we're aiming for, is a perfect joint, so that you can see there, this won't ever come loose again. We won't have any issues with this again. Same spot. There's a little bit all the way down here at the bottom too, which is good. If I'm getting contact throughout most of it, that's good. That means we're in the right shape. We just need to thin out the whole thing a little bit, and I like that. That's good news. We don't have a whole lot of high spots or low spots. It just needs to be thinner throughout. So you can see this side is up here as well, right where it was. It's also dark up in here. So I'll just be careful, carve that away. You know, it just helps to have both tools. It's looking better. The other thing is, if I ever hit a point in which, like, it's getting a little dark or hard to see all the spots, I can just take a little bit of sandpaper and kind of just clean up the outside, and it will help take off any like stray marks or anything, and it'll just brighten that wood back up so that when you start running the carbon paper again, it's easier to see. So we do it again. Sometimes it helps to kind of give it a, like try to torque it back and forth or see what you can do to get everything to make as much contact as you can, because you got to make those marks on there, which means it's got to do it by, pressing against it. So I kind of torque it, see what I can do to get that to mark, and then pull it out. That usually leaves pretty good marks. You can see now we're working on the back. This side still got marks up here. So this is going to take a little while, so I will stop filming and keep on working. Alright, well, I've been working on this for a while now, and I finally got the neck fitting all the way in to the joint. So we are ready to glue this thing back up. As per usual, didn't need that big of shims on here, so I shaved down a whole bunch. It hardly ever needs all of what I put on there, because I don't usually end up moving it a whole lot, because and the angle itself wasn't all that bad once we got all glue cleaned out. So we are ready to start gluing this thing back up. So I'm just going to start laying down some glue. I am going to try to glue the fretboard extension up all at the same time as the neck joint. That just generally makes things easier. One less glue up I have to try to do, and trying to get glue in here after the joint is on is not the easiest. So we take care of it all at once, and it will be good to go when we come back. Alright. Getting glue in the body side is always a bit of a pain. Luckily there's a little bit of excess glue up here on the top, so I'll use it to help paint this up. So that's looking good. Glue on both sides. Now I'll do the neck side as well. You probably don't necessarily have to cover both sides with glue, but I like to do it just to be sure that I have good coverage. I am putting a big glob on here, and then I'm going to paint that up the dovetail. Rather than try to work with sliding glue on this surface, I'm just going to do this. I think this is the better call here. Let's see if I can do this in the camera. Not really. Yeah, okay, so we got a good glue coverage on this thing. I know it's covering all the surfaces. I'll go ahead and wipe this out for the fretboard extension. And that should be that. We should be ready to stick this thing down. So what I'll do is I'll put this in that joint. I'll grab a clamp and we'll clamp that in there. Got a couple pieces of big leather, a couple big pieces of leather. I'm gonna sit on here so my clamp doesn't slide around too bad. If I can get everything held all at once, it'd be great. Get down here, slide down. That's doing pretty good. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to throw a clamp on the heel as soon as I get the leather out of my way. That's pulling from the bottom of the heel back to the neck block to help make sure we got all the angle we can get out of this thing. Also just to pull it in. There we go. So I'm going to kind of lean this. Stick this big squeeze clamp on the heel. Squeeze that in. You can see that there. There's just a big squeeze clamp, runs the whole length. So it's on the heel block. And that's probably just about it for the neck joint. What I'll do is I'll grab another clamp, or a couple for the fretboard extension, to make sure we're totally stuck there. There's one. See if we can get another one in there. That's honestly looking really good. I'm not sure how much more I could be asking for there. You get a piece of cloth and wipe out that glue coming out of the fretboard extension, but that there's glue coming out of the fretboard extension tells me it's all the way pressed down. That's what I like. Okay. Everything else can be cleaned up when the clamps aren't in my way, but except for it leaning because of that clamp underneath it, I think we're good. And it'll be fine. Sitting like that, just kind of hard to see. So, we'll let this sit for quite a while, set up. I think we should be starting to look at probably a setup after that. So, this setup over the weekend, getting that neck glued back on, and it's looking really good, but we've got some cleanup to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I've got a razor blade here, and this isn't really cleanup on here, but this is stuff I've wanted to do for a while. Where these cracks are a little high, I've got this razor blade and 2 pieces of tape, and that tape is going to kind of raise the middle section up just a little bit as I set it on here, so that hopefully we can scrape down these high spots just a little bit, and then I'll try and buff them back out so it'll be nice and shiny still, but maybe not quite so high. I'm just gonna very carefully scrape away some of that high spot where it was glued. On all 3 of these cracks. This one's a lot better already. Oh, both of those are better. I'll try and finish up this last one here. And I think we're looking good. Those were the most pronounced cracks. There's not a whole lot else that needs taken down, at least in that regard, with this tool. So I think we're going to be good there. What I'll do is I'll just kind of buff this back out. I'll try and take this to the buffer and just do that, see if that works. It should work pretty good because it should be a very even spot where it's not nice and shiny. But this should be good. I didn't cut through the finish anywhere, so that should be looking good. As for cleanup up here, we still need to put this fret back in, and there might be just a little bit of dust fills, ebony fills we want to do on this fingerboard yet. But we're looking good so far. Well, we're getting this thing cleaned up pretty good. What I'd like to do now is put the fret back in it. We're going to do something slightly different this time around. I need to clean out the slot before we go a whole lot further. So I'm going to get out the little tool I kind of made to do this. Just a little saw blade that's missing most of its teeth. Alright, so first thing we got to clean out that slot. So I'm just going to real carefully put my saw in there. We're just going to knock out any junk we got in there. This shouldn't be too bad because, in one that's not bound, and all I'm doing is making sure any glue that's squeezed out of the holes gets cleaned out so our fret goes right back in. And I think it's fine the way it is. We didn't have too many issues going into this, so it shouldn't be too bad. Now we'll grab the fret, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of wood glue in here. For starters, this will be filler. This isn't going to like hold the fret in. The wood glue is not going to do a whole lot for the fret. But what this is going to do, really, is it's going to allow me to put some sawdust in after the fret to help fill any gaps. Alright. The other thing it does is it doesn't, it's not going to stick to the fret real well, but it is going to hold it in place a little bit better than nothing. If I'd get it off on my fingers. I think that's it. So, there's a little bit of glue around the edges. I'm just going to take, I've got a piece of ebony here that I was just sanding on so that I'd have dust to do that job right there. So I got a big thing of ebony dust. We're just going to kind of press that in. And that's what that wood glue was for, really, was to make a nice filler for any gaps. Of course, we're going to come through here and clean this fretboard up with a razor blade later, so that really ought to be good enough. We'll give that some time to get dry on there. I think these frets need leveled. They got a couple of flat spots. So we'll do that next. But we're moving along, we're making progress, and that's what we're looking for. Alright, so I said we'd probably be doing a fret job next, and I was not lying. We're going to do a fret job next. There's a couple of flat spots, nice divots, and a couple of these. I want to level them out. They're getting a little short, but they're not so short that I can't level them, crown them again. You may notice I'm going to be doing this fairly quickly, and the rest of the guitar probably fairly quickly, as I don't have a whole lot of time to get this thing done before I want this video out. I've spent a little bit of time this week with an unexpected adventure to the hospital, and not for me, but for a family member. So I've not got a whole lot of time left to get this done in the time I want to get the video out for. So I'm probably going to rush through a lot of the rest of the guitar, but we'll get this thing done in time, I hope. There's no adjustable truss rod on this guitar, so I don't have to worry about straightness so much of the neck. Where it's at is where it's at. As per usual, I'm not pushing down any here. I'm letting the weight of the file do all of the work because it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to get these, you know, moving away. Alright, that's as good as that's getting. I don't want to take any more off of there, and what that is good enough. I'm going to recrown these now because they've got nice flats across the top, so I've got a crowning file out. And we're going to go through here and just take that flat off and make it round again. So we'll start polishing those frets out. I'll start with a piece of 600 just to get us going. This will start working out most of the most of the file marks. And it'll really start to get them looking good. There's not a whole lot of shaping that goes on with the sandpaper, but the 600 is the one that comes the closest to it. Alright, that's looking pretty good for that 600. It's got a nice even shine now, which isn't like too reflective yet, but it's nice and even. So the other piece of sandpaper we'll do is a piece of 1200. It will really actually start to get them shining. And then that'll be it for the sandpaper before we move on to the micro polishing pads. $1200 is really where they start to get nice and reflective. They start to anyway. Not quite yet, but it's working on it. Alright, that's looking pretty good. We'll now start to work through these micro polishing pads, and they will take it up to a really, really high shine as we go. There's about 6 of these, and you just rub them just like sandpaper. They have grits on them, but they're not exactly the same grit as like sandpaper is. It's like a proprietary number. But I've rubbed them all the way off on both sides, so I've started numbering them on the side with tally marks, so I know how to go, how they go in order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's probably good for 1. Move on to 2. Move on to number 3. Those are really starting to shine now. Move on to number 4. Alright, my hand's starting to hurt. So you know we're doing good. Switch to lefty for a little while. Finally, the last one. Alright, so this will bring these frets up to a real nice shine, but it's kind of hard to tell right now with the foggy back. The wood got real foggy as I went along, but that's okay because we're going to clean that up with a nice new razor blade. This is why I don't bother taping off the fingerboard, because I was going to do this anyway. So it saves me time and saves the customer money. So we've got a brand new razor blade here. There are some fingernail grooves a little higher up in the higher frets. If I remember correctly, the customer who owns this particular instrument said this belonged to his dad. I don't think we're going to get all of Dad out of this fingerboard, but I'll clean it up a little bit, but we're definitely still going to have some of them grooves in there. I prefer to just leave a little bit of them there, especially on a sentimental piece like this, because, you know, they were just there. They were put there by Dad, and they can stay there to some degree. So let's take our brand new razor blade here, clean up these frets. Because they're radiused, I have to work across them. I can't just, you know, do a nice flat. I have to work across the radius. And we can just go right over top the dots and scrape them a little bit, and they turn out looking just fine. Alright, that's looking pretty good. We'll sweep that off. And then for final touches, we'll oil that board. I'm basically just going to take some of my Old Faithful here, some Be Good wood oil. Make sure it's well mixed. And we'll just run a bead down the fretboard. I'll just mix that in with my fingers. And that is going to make that look very good. Doing the bridge as well always helps unify the look. So we rub that in, and then we'll take a clean cloth and wipe off the excess. That's it right there. That's looking like a nice new board. Nice shiny frets, nice clean wood. Still got a little bit of groove in there. Nothing that's going to hurt playing though. Just kind of sentimental value. Alright, so the next step, we'll need a new saddle. Because the old one was carved down so low, it's not going to work for what we want anymore. So if we're going to make a new saddle, we need to measure how wide the slot is, and we'll do that in a couple of spots. It's about 90 thousandths, maybe a little less than that. And then what we'll do is we'll lock that in. We'll go find a blank and we'll thin that down so that it fits into the slot. Now conveniently, I did that before we got started. So I've got a blank that fits in the slot. The problem is it's way too long. So the next step will be to measure the length. Lock that in. Take our blank here and our length. We'll mark that up. So we've got a perfect length there. Then we'll go cut that out. And hopefully it should fit right in there. Alright, so we've got a saddle that fits in there. It's going to be way too tall now, but we're moving along. We'll use the radius on the old saddle to get a good radius on the new saddle. This way. So we should have a very good radius on there. We'll also need to put some brake angle on there so that it actually has strings leaving the saddle there. So with some radius and some brake angle, we should start to be
looking like a guitar saddle. It's still going to be crazy high. So I'll probably go knock off a good 100 thousandths already. But it's looking good. It doesn't wiggle in there. Fits nice and snug. And it matches the radius of the old one. It's going to need maybe just a hair cleanup because the disc sander I use is maybe a little gritty. I notice it tends to catch if I don't give the top a final sand. So if I find some sandpaper, I can just basically we should have a nice smooth surface there for our strings to ride across. Cool. So I'm going to go knock off about 100 thousandths, and then I think we're basically talking about strings. I don't think there's anything left for us to do before we get some strings, besides replacing the one pin that was broken. We'll do that as well as I get strings ready here. Alright, so I lowered the saddle by about 100 thousandths. I also put some basic intonation shaping on there. Kind of brought that B string back. It almost always has to go back, so I went ahead and just did that ahead of time. I've got a pin to replace the one that was broken. When I was taking these apart, one of these broke in half. I pulled the top off and the bottom half stayed in there, and I had to reach inside and poke in from the inside to actually get it to come out. But I got one that looks just like it. You can't tell it any difference. It was out of the spare parts, so that should be good. I think we're ready to put some strings on here now. Start thinking about setup. So we will start stringing this thing up here. As per usual, I'm using the same strings I always use. Got my big box of strings here. I'm doing this backwards from how I usually do it, and that always throws me off. But we're going to do it anyway. I'm just doing a quick check on the nut, making sure that there's not any gunk in there, and there sure is. There's a ton of junk in those slots. So I'm going to grab my nut file slots and just clean them out real quick. This isn't on camera, so it's kind of, I can't really show it, but I'm just going to run the right size file through each hole, and that should knock out any junk that's in there. May as well graphite those a little bit as well, which is a pencil lead. I'm just going to basically color the inside of the slots. That may have been what I was moving out, but it looked far more chunky to me, so I'll go ahead and get this strung up. I can do it a lot faster if I'm not doing it on camera. So we'll get this strung up and then work on tuning it up and see where we are for setup. It's a lot of ups. So we've got this strung up and up to tune, and I gotta say that it is sounding really good. We can finally check the action now. And it's not crazy bad. It's 130 thousandths. We've got plenty of saddle for that. And about 120 thousandths. So I need 20, 40, 80 thousandths off the treble side. That shouldn't be an issue. And 30, 40, 80 thousandths off the bass side. So 80 thousandths off the saddle should get us right where we want to be. This thing has been sounding great. I tuned it up and was playing around with it, stretching the strings out, and it is sounding really, really good. Really, we shouldn't be too far off of being done with this thing now. 80 thousandths is not too much to ask. On a new saddle that's as high as it is. It's not crazy tall, and so our saddle's going to be maybe a hair on the short side, but it's going to be sitting at a perfect action and have a good saddle height. Alright, just trying to make sure we're all loose here before I go pulling the pins on this. Pin holder back out, and my pin puller back out. I'll pull these pins real quick. Okay, so we'll get that saddle out of there. Realizing you can't see what I'm doing here. That B string just doesn't want to come out of there. There we go. So we got that saddle out. We'll take out our Sharpie. We'll mark up the corners. We'll get out our calipers. We'll find 80 thousandths. Make sure it's zeroed. 80 thousandths. 80 thousandths of an inch. And then we'll mark that out and take that to the sander and knock it off to that line. Well, we got this thing playing great. This is an old Martin. It sounds like an old Martin. It plays like an old Martin should. I have been spoiled by this guitar already. I've played a lot of guitars, and there have been some that have been really bassy, and there have been some that have some very clean highs, but nothing like this. This is a very clear guitar all the way across. It's got some room for bass, but those high notes are just clear. So, I got the action down at the very end there, down to right where I was asking for, you know, right about 90 thousandths, 80 thousandths, bass and treble. And the saddle's maybe a hair low, but it's fine. It'll hold this forever. This should never be an issue. There's maybe one or two more cleaning up things I want to do to this thing, but for the video purposes, I think we're done here. This thing is playing great. It sounds amazing. If you feel like we missed a big section in the middle there, it is because this guitar was on a live stream, about a 2-hour long live stream where I worked on it and kind of talked with the viewers. So if you missed that and you're wondering where's the middle of working on this guitar, it's probably there. So I hope you go check that out. But this thing turned out really, really cool. I really like this old guitar. I'm sure the customer's going to be plenty happy to get this thing back. It's great. But I hope you enjoyed watching this work on this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.